Rob has asked me not to mess with the files before I send them to him. So, like, what's the proper protocol here? Do I do what he asks and send him a burp, or do I go in and shamefully edit it and pretend or hope he doesn't notice?
From ScienceSortOf.com, you're listening to Science Sort of.
Welcome to Science Sort of. This is episode 325. I'm your host, Ryan, and joining me to talk about things that are science, things that are sort of science, and things that wish they were science around the theme Archosaurus and eology is Patrick Wheatley.
Hey, glad to be here.
And his arch nemesis, Joe Batwinnis.
Hello.
I don't think you guys are nemesis, but
I don't think so.
Had to come up with something silly, and that's what I said.
We've even met once.
Yeah. Yes, we have.
Only once?
Only once.
And Joe's always liking my tweets about anti-car stuff. So
I am.
Even though Joe's a car guy.
I am. But I desperately want to be able to ride my bike to work, and it's just never going to happen for me.
Right.
Would the tires make it in terms of just melting on the? You live in a very hot place, Joe.
I do. I'm more worried about getting just plastered by an 18-wheeler.
Right. Yeah, the two most recent bike rides I've done, I've almost been run off the road by cars. But that was honk first, too, as if oh, okay, thanks for warning me that you were about to hit me on my bike for no reason other than me being in a lane. And both times it was on streets where there were multiple lanes for that side of traffic that they could have just gone in the other lane and gone around me. But
yeah, I've got mostly roads around me that are 2-lane, no shoulder, 55 mile an hour.
Yeah.
It's not great.
Yeah. I'm more pro walking than anti-car, but yeah, I feel like people who bike commute, I feel like they're like vegans. They get a lot of hate, but really you should be applauding every vegan that there is because they're, you can eat meat because they're not, right? You can drive your gas guzzling SUV because they're, using their cellular metabolism to get to work instead. You should clap for them instead of trying to run them off the road.
Please clap.
Speaking of a historically and famously non-vegan group of animals, let's talk about archosaurs, crocodiles. I guess there are vegan archosaurs.
Oh, there probably were.
There are still. Yeah. There are plenty of birds,
That's true.
But if we're speaking specifically to crocodiliforms or crocodilians, I don't believe there have ever been any vegivore crocodiles.
I think, I'm not caught up on the literature the way I was once upon a time, but I believe there are some actually that suspected veggie crocs. Yeah,
and they did it so the other crocs could eat meat, is what you're saying.
Exactly.
Like to work.
I don't follow the logic there entirely, but we're not talking about crocodile feeding habits today. Instead, we are talking about inner ear morphology because there was an article that came out in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. First author, Julia Schwab, a long list of other authors, including a few folks that I know, including Chris Brochu, James Clark, Stephen Brusette, who we've not had on the show, but is on my list of people to one day get on the show. A few other names I recognize in there, so good list of folks working on this work, and the article is entitled Inner Ear Sensory System Changes as Extinct Crocodilomorphs Transition from Land to Water. And this is a study focused on a specific group of ancient crocodile. Is it fair to call them crocodiles, or would it be more appropriate to call them crocodile relatives, Patrick?
Yeah, I think crocodile relatives is better in this case.
Okay, so these are the thalattoscuhians, and we all know what that means.
That's the word I use every day.
Thalato, I believe, means swimming, and sukian means crocodile.
Yeah, it just means crocodile in Greek. I think sukus means crocodile in Greek. So they're a cool group of pseudo crocs, almost crocs. They were around sort of, I think, Jurassic to kind of the end of the Cretaceous. I think. Early Cretaceous.
Yeah, the article you sent out from Reuters that described, the sort of the plain language description of the research said that they died out in the Cretaceous about 125 million years ago. Cretaceous ended pretty dramatically 66 million years ago.
So they did not make it all the way to the end of the Cretaceous when all sort of large marine reptiles took a big hit. So they were gone before that. But they're really interesting because they evolved in really sort of whaley dolphin looking ways, and they spent essentially all their time in ocean water.
And why is, I mean, so we have saltwater crocodiles today, but give us a quick status update on how saltwater and modern day crocodiles get together.
So most of especially the alligator side of crocodiles, right? So alligators and their relatives are much more freshwater adapted. The crocodile side of the tree is more saltwater adapted, but young ones can't really deal with it very well. So lots of them will lay eggs and hatch eggs in much less salty water. And then as they get bigger and can sort of carry more, I guess you think of percentage-wise, ingesting a little bit of salt water doesn't overwhelm their internal physiology. They can handle and filter salt water better as they get larger. But you do find, so American crocodiles, which are in sort of the Caribbean and southernmost Florida, and the saltwater crocodiles, which are in sort of Australia and the Malaysia area, go way, can find them way out in the ocean, and track them going from large distances from island to island. So
just like Komodo dragons.
Yeah, slightly more mobile than Komodo dragons, but yes,
just like sea turtles. I don't know. Just thinking about the diversity of marine reptiles available to us today.
Right. Yeah. So they're maybe not fully marine. So and actually, so this is interesting. We should sidestep and talk about what about the morphology this paper found so interesting, I guess. So specifically, they're looking at ears and the way that the inner ear evolved and got larger. Mostly, they CT scan skulls, and we're looking at changes associated with sort of the beginnings of the group to see sort of when they first went fully marine or pelagic, as they're saying, which is sort of like free swimming. And the reason the inner ear is so important there is because we use it to orient ourselves, right? And if you're a terrestrial animal, you really only have to orient yourselves in 2 dimensions, right? You're walking, and you need some 3D abilities, but for the most part, you're living on a plane. But once you're in the water, you really are fully in 3 dimensions, and you need to orient yourself in 3 dimensions because your prey can move really in ways that it can't really do on land.
So do birds have something similar?
They do. So they do. And similar studies have been done looking at when, early birds, transition from dinosaurs to birds. And there's an area of the brain called the paraflocculus that is associated with being able to orient yourselves and deal with all the extra brain processing that you have to do if you're flying. And so that's the paraflocculus is an area they'll look for in CT scans in birds to sort of get an indication that this animal probably was actually flying and not just gliding.
I should get one of those. Sounds useful.
Sure, Elon Musk will install one in you.
Says the engineer, right? Just grab one of those. Patch that in. Yeah. So I think this ties into a lot of the work I did with my dissertation. I was looking chemically at crocodiles and their relatives, trying to figure out whether the first modern crocodiles, the ancestor of today's crocodiles and alligators, did they start out as a freshwater animal or did they start out as a saltwater animal? And the answer I came to in my research was it's definitely a possibility that they evolved as a saltwater tolerant clade. And it kind of ties back into the extinction event at the KT event. Like none of the large marine reptiles really made it through that extinction, but alligators and crocodiles did. And it's probably because they were laying their eggs in freshwater, and something about that behavior made them less susceptible to just being completely wiped out. And they were only just wish they had been wiped out, probably.
I mean, I've always felt like crocodiles living at that land to water interface had a pretty good deal. Like I feel like once you evolve, I'm surprised that anything ever leaves that niche, which both cetaceans which are whales and thalattoscuhians did, presumably. So I always just see like you kind of get to chill right at the water's edge. Things got to come drink. You snatch them, you get a meal, you bury your eggs in some compost. It keeps them warm. Like it just
Right.
seems like ideal in so many ways.
It's like life's a beach.
Pretty good diversity of food sources, right?
I did see an American crocodile in southern Florida
You did?
over Thanksgiving, Patrick, and
I've
it was
never seen one in the wild.
terrifying.
Yeah.
Oh my god,
Cool.
it was huge. Like it is one of the, I have a number of, because of the way I live my life, I have a number of stories where I have been scared of an animal that's nearby me. And this was up there with one of the scarier feelings, just because it was getting dark. So I was already an animal that's very good at not being seen when it doesn't want to be seen. And the water was murky enough that this animal had no problem hiding itself, even though it was huge. Mm-hmm. And it definitely started swimming towards where I was standing. And I was standing on a dock, but it was an extension of the dock on the pillar. So it was like a floating part. And if this animal had hit that floating part with any force, I would have gone flying into the water. And I realized that. But there were people behind me also looking at this crocodile. And so I had to, kind of gingerly start of like, all right, I'm going to start backing up a little bit. And like I had seen, I had been on foot near an alligator earlier in the day, and not nearly as scary as this big crocodile. I don't know. I think alligators are cute.
Yeah, I lived in Florida for like 2 years, and I think I only ever saw a wild alligator once, and it was on a golf course, just like hanging out next to.
This was in the Everglades, so this was.
This one was fully on land and gave no craps that we were near it.
Right. Yeah, the crocodiles really have a reputation of being more aggressive. Like I said, I've never dealt with a real crocodile.
I just posted a photo in the Slack, and you can see how close to the edge of the dock I was standing when it turned and started swimming towards us.
The big boy.
Oh yeah.
Probably mad that you were shining all these lights in his face.
They were very powerful flashlights, and there were a lot of bugs. It was unpleasant quickly.
Yeah. The worst part about the alligators and the crocodiles is they like to hang out with all the bugs.
So what's cool is often in evolution, when new groups colonize new areas to live in, we see similar adaptations, which is called convergent evolution. Julie, how would you explain convergent evolution? Julie's.
Do I have to come on? Do you want me to explain from here?
Well, I think it's going to sound better if you come over here.
Special guest star.
Julie's here, everybody, because we never leave.
Because we never have left.
Tell us about convergent evolution, Julie. She had to write a label on this. It took her a long time, so I'm giving her a chance to vent.
Oh, no. I mean, it's sad because there's never a good way of explaining it to people. Because the thing that we found out with the word is that the word convergent is really confusing to people, because people means it's two separate lineages that then converge.
So this is how crocodiles and whales are
one.
able to mate.
Right. So that's what people think when you tell them convergent evolution, and you have to say, no, it's actually more of like, it's two totally unrelated, even though technically everything is related, but like, let's ignore that for now, right? Like, let's not get complicated, but it's like two unrelated things do something similar because they've adapted to similar conditions. So like if you are two different organisms that have limbs, so you're a whale or you're a crocodile, and you need to move through water, which is difficult, you might both independently evolve the same solution.
Flippers.
Like flippers, fins, that sort of thing.
Cool.
So that's what we tried to explain to people.
And now the museum's closed, so good job, Julie.
Now the museum's closed. Oh my God. It was my fault the whole time.
Get out of here.
Well, I would say, though, that people still don't get it. So if
the museum's closed. They can't go read the label.
But I would like, if listeners have ways that they've explained it to friends or family members or other things like that, I would really love to know, because it's just good to have all of those extra analogies.
All right. Contact us, page at sciencesorter.com. Bye.
Okay, thanks. Bye.
Cool.
Julie will be back for the drink segment because she's been trying to steal this drink I'm having out of the fridge for the past 2 days.
I had a similar problem with my drink.
Thalattoscuhians.
Yeah. So, but I think you were getting to like the inner ear adaptations that we've seen in whales and other groups, because they also have to navigate in a much more of a 3D environment.
Right. So the semicircular canals, which are three small canals in your inner ear that are oriented, X, Y, and Z, right?
Yeah.
In thalattoscuhians and in whales, the convergence is they become fatter and smaller.
Yeah.
And so I guess making them fatter makes them more sensitive, I guess.
I assume so, that you're just basically turning this instrument into being able to tell more fine degradations in
sort of this one goes up to 11 solution. You're making so there's more room on the dial for you to fine tune what you're sensing.
Right. I think so. Like, especially there's one direction that doesn't really make that much difference in 2 dimensions, right?
Let's say the Z-plane, right?
I don't know. And pitch and right, sure. Yeah, so you might need to stretch that out so it's more sensitive if you need to orient yourselves in what turns out to be a true 3-dimensional environment.
And then another thing that this paper found that the Reuters article didn't really go into is the timing on this convergence was different in thalattoscuhians and whales. So it looks like thalattoscuhians maintained the crocodilian style inner ear longer in their evolutionary progression towards being fully marine adapted, whereas cetaceans seem to have changed that inner ear structure almost immediately in their evolution, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, crocodiles are probably already pretty well adapted for hunting and living in, rivers and things. I guess if you're going to go into really deep water, that becomes more necessary. But I think whales were leading a much more like beached existence than possibly some of the. And
another, Julie was mentioning sort of misconceptions people have about evolution. And I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that evolution always optimizes something as opposed to just making something work barely enough that it doesn't break. It's much more of a tinkerer and sort of is this functional enough that the thing isn't dead? Fine. Not gonna.
Yeah, a bit of a
I'm not gonna modify it. Yeah. In some way. Does the optic nerve going upside down and I have to flip everything? Fine. Who cares? Whatever. Wait, Julie's got more comments apparently.
Okay. The other reason why it's difficult to write a label about this is that in English, we tend to have sentences that have a subject and an action. But when you try to write about this, you have to make sure that you're not saying that like the whale is purposefully doing this. Like, even though that's the sentence that makes the most sense in English, like it's the simplest, most active form, but like that's not how evolution works. There's no purposeful agent. And so then it becomes a very convoluted roundabout with lots of caveats and blah, 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 blah.
Right, because otherwise you're saying the Plinko machine decided which slot the thing is going to fall in. And it's like, no, everybody understands that's not how it works, but they don't understand that with evolution.
Right, and it's like, okay, the crocodile didn't choose to get flippers. Like it wasn't an active like, you know what? Shucks, I'm having a hard time moving through water. You know what I should have? One of those newfangled flippers.
Someone is going to send us a photo of an alligator stealing a person's flippers, and that will be an alligator that did choose to get flippers. and
there you go.
You'll have to eat your just desserts. Now get out of here, Julie. She's gone.
I'm back.
No, go away. I'm trying to record a podcast.
I'm never away.
I know. Alone together. So Patrick, I like what you're saying there. That the crocodiles clearly had like this. They were swimmers in probably shallow nearshore waters for longer, whereas whales kind of just dove right in from the land.
Right. I think whales were very much like the ambush predator for terrestrial things, and crocodile relatives were probably hunting fish already.
Plus, I imagine whale ears, because of the way our jaws work relative to crocodile jaws, I wonder if the feeding change precipitated some sort of ear changes more quickly in cetaceans than in thalattoscuhians.
That's a really interesting thing. So the crocodiles have numerous jawbones, and in a mammal, those extra jawbones are already sitting in the ear.
Yeah,
because we've reduced our jaw to just basically one bone on each side, and the extra bones wound up in the ear. So that's a really interesting thought that I hadn't really spent much time thinking about, Ryan. Good one.
All right, well, now that we've proposed some follow-up research, I think we've earned a drink. Do you have any more questions, Joe, about thalattoscuhians and convergent evolution and inner ears and swimming before we move on?
Minor question, off topic a little bit. I don't know, related topic. Was there a species that we've identified that was like whales pre-diving into the ocean?
Yeah, there is actually a pretty good evolutionary transitional stages for whales. There's one called Pachycetus, which is from Pakistan. So Pachycetus means Pakistan whale.
P-A-K-I,
cetus.
with the C.
I believe that the cetacea is also the Greek for whale. And yeah, it's almost sort of, I kind of describe Pachycetus as looking like it almost has like a possum shape to it.
Looks like, yeah.
So like a large carnivorous hooved possum that transitioned to the water. There's also Ambulocetus, which means walking whale. That is a still-legged whale. But pretty quickly, you start seeing forms like Basilosaurus, which sounds like it should be basil lizard, but it is not. They thought it was a lizard, so its name got a little screwed up there. But that, by the time you start seeing Basilosaurus, you're seeing what looks very recognizably like, oh, that's a whale.
Yeah, I found a little diagram that traces it.
All right, well,
neato, man.
Head into the drink and let's get a drink.
Let's drink something.
Drinks. They come up next.
Drinks.
It would not be an episode of Science Sort of if we didn't also talk about what we are drinking. Let's go from... What direction should we go in, team?
Clockwise.
Okay. I think that means starting with Patrick, because Patrick comes from where the clocks start.
Okay.
Clever.
Thanks.
All right. I am drinking a Goram IPA from Butcombe Brewing. It's an IPA that...
This very much rings of like, are these words okay in British English? Because it sounds like an inappropriate series of words you just put together.
I think it's fine. Yeah.
Okay.
Button might be.
And well, it like sounds like Sodom and Gomorrah. Like, I don't know. What's happening?
Goram. So it's named after Bristol's very own giant, who was partial to a well-crafted ale. This Avon, and Avon is just Old English for river. This Avon IPA uses a blend of American and Worcester hops to achieve the perfect balance between stone fruit, citrus, and spicy hop aromas.
Wait, is that why the bottled water is called Avian?
Well, it probably is a similar root.
Evian?
Maybe? I don't know. Yeah.
All right.
But there's like Shakespeare was from Stratford-on-Avon, but there's tons of towns that are on Avon, and there's tons of rivers called just Avon in the UK because Avon just meant river in Old English.
I think if I lived in the UK, I would seriously consider getting a canal boat. Those look fun.
Yeah, it does look.
Seems like it'd be cool to live in one.
And I want a boat that I can live in. I think tiny houses are stupid when boats exist.
Some of us don't live near water. Ryan.
Yeah, but your house doesn't have to be tiny then. You got land. Put as much as you want.
Yeah. Fair play.
Like if you're gonna live in that small of a space, I want it to be mobile. That's my thing is mobility. Right. Like if a tiny house, if you could drive a tiny house, be called like an RV, and people would want them. Yeah. The kind of people who want tiny houses wouldn't want them, I guess. But maybe a bicycle powered tiny home would be fine. I just want it to be able to move. If it's gonna be small, make it mobile. That's my plea. And canal boats look like fun. It'd be fun to go through those old fashioned locks where you gotta like let the water in and out yourself. Pro canal boat.
Yeah, those would be cool. I guess you got to beef up your like paraflocculus and inner ears if you're going for a life on the water. But otherwise,
if you're staying on the surface of the water, it's functionally the same as life on the surface of land.
Yeah, you hope it's all working out. I suppose.
Just need to be able to sense that you've gotten wet, and then that's an indication there's a problem.
That's a tactile kinesthetic sense.
Yeah. Anyway, big fan of this IPA, but remember it's 5%. Remember, the British IPAs are not really as strong as American IPAs, so. They come in pints instead of 12 ounces, though, so it all works out.
Nice. I am having, as the person on our round-the-clock tour here, I'm having a PBR, which may seem off-brand, but I picked up some chili dogs from the dive bar in our neighborhood. I was desperate. And I saw that they had this PBR available for takeaway that was called a PBR Hard Coffee. So it's a 5% alcoholic, contains milk PBR coffee drink.
That sounds not right.
Interesting.
I'm pouring it into a glass because I wanted to see what it looks like. It's creamy looking. Julie, did you want to taste this?
I've only been waiting all week.
Ooh, that's good.
Oh,
That's
really?
dangerously good. I like that a lot. That's like if you had a little kick to it.
I don't get the kick.
It doesn't taste boozy at all, and that's the danger.
Wait, but it's not beer with...
It's hard coffee.
Oh, okay. But wait, so what's the hard part?
Alcohol, ethanol.
But like vodka?
I don't know. PBR probably.
What?
Get out of here.
Yeah, malted beverage.
All right, Julie's stealing the rest of the can.
Ah!
I've only got what's in my glass, but hopefully the caffeine kick is enough to... I mean, just the whole caffeine and alcohol together has always been a bit baffling, but...
I mean, they're big fans of their espresso martini in the UK.
Espresso martinis are good.
I don't think I've ever had one.
They can be good. They often aren't. But yeah, they like them. They like them here.
I had one last time I was in Portland for a Baja race.
That seems like they might be able to pull one together.
Yeah, Joe, and look what's happening to Portland now.
Yeah,
great job.
All my fault.
just blaming random people for the state of the world. What are you having, Joe?
Well, in an interesting turn of events, we went from beer to beer coffee, and I have a mocha latte that I made myself.
Okay. Yeah, it's kind of early in the day, isn't it?
It's all of noon, yeah. So I decided to go with a coffee beverage. I posted a picture of it in the Slack for you guys.
Oh, whipped cream too.
Yeah, man. I went all out.
Nice.
So yeah, just some espresso from a coffee shop out here. Espresso beans that I made in my espresso machine. And then some Ghirardelli chocolate syrup. And then some whipped cream on top.
Very fancy. Good work.
Thanks.
Coffee and chocolate, two New World products. Speaking of the New World, archaeology and the Mayans.
Onwards.
Let's go over there and talk about that.
Right, shall I start?
Please.
So if I'm going to go all the way back, I was having a conversation with my father. So, I'm living in Europe and I'm going to lots of quote archaeological sites. They wouldn't really call them archaeological sites here because it's just a castle that's been there for 1,000 years. I guess it's archaeology, but they don't really think of it that way, right? And talking with him about this, and he was like, I've always wondered why the United States Native Americans never really had any stone structures. There's really no masonry that happened here. And I was like, that is interesting, but I think we just never had the population density to make it necessary to settle in one place. I didn't really have a good answer. But then I picked up this book. It's called The Lost City of the Monkey God. And it's by a guy named Douglas Preston, who writes for National Geographic frequently. And this book basically traces the story of finding a series of archaeological sites in Honduras in an area that is really, really inaccessible. And they flew equipped with LiDAR over these parts in the jungle to essentially remote map them initially. And then when it found helicopter drop sites, once they had already found the ruins, and then dropped people in. And so it's a pretty fascinating story because essentially after these cities were lost, about the time the conquistadors showed up and infected everybody with smallpox, right? So there really hadn't been anyone in these areas of the jungle for the last 500 years or so. And so just to be the first people that get dropped into those jungle sites with mainly the objective of looking for these cities and sort of mapping these cities, but also just the ecological story there of being dropped in a place where people really hadn't been for 500 years was pretty cool. But anyway, it turns out these cities in Honduras were probably not Mayan. They were sort of surrounded by Mayan culture, but they themselves were probably a somewhat separate culture that was aware of the Mayan culture, but had its own sort of thing going on. So I'd been reading this book and sort of thinking about this and and of course, the Mayan civilization and Aztec civilization are sort of the New World answer to Masonry in the Old World, right? So I think
not the Incans. Not
sure,
the Incans some love.
The Incans as well, but I think
you can't fit a razor blade between two giant rocks that have been stacked on top of each other, as if that's sort of crazy engineering achievement.
that is an accomplishment.
I mean, people always point out like it's so finely stone crafted you can't fit a razor. Like you could stack two rocks on top of each other and not fit a razor blade in between them. I just never understood that claim as being a big deal. Anyway, sorry, moving on.
Anyway, it never really occurred to me that Masonry was the pinnacle of human civilization, but I guess a lot of people sort of feel this way.
So we found out Patrick's not in the Freemasons.
Right. Because I think Europe treated the discovery of sort of Mayan, Incan, and Aztec civilization as, sort of astounding and amazing. And I think there's been a number of sort of stories about it, like the lost city of Zed or Z, depending on which side of the line you follow on, and other similar things. Just this fascination with anything stone carved or and then constructed or cemented really captured people's imagination. So as I was thinking about sort of that book and my father's question about why is there really no masonry in the United States, I ran across this article from 2011. Let me see if I've got it open in a tab now. I think I've lost it. That was basically from an archaeological blog talking about a potential Mayan site in northernmost Georgia. This sort of, do you have it up, Brian, where you can sort of read us?
Yeah, the massive 1,100-year-old Mayan site discovered in Georgia's mountains, ? Because we're not sure. Written by Richard Thornton, who is maybe an archaeologist.
I think he's at University of Georgia, which just makes this even more confusing. Like it's
he references work by an archaeologist named Mark Williams, who's at the University of Georgia, and that's sort of where the controversy begins, because Mark Williams is the person who actually did the excavation at this site and claims that this blog post misrepresents his work.
Interesting. So the site is basically in the Chattahoochee National Forest in sort of northernmost Georgia, just across the border from North Carolina. And interestingly, there is quite a bit of like stone masonry work there. There's also a petroglyph site associated with it, but it's mostly terracing, which I guess the layout of the terraces is somewhat reminiscent of cultures in the southwestern U.S. and Mayan cultures. I find all this sort of fascinating and just characteristic of the U.S. that we had pulled apart a lot of it because when we were constructing, I don't know, highway projects or whatever, there was already this quarried stone available in the area. So we just pulled apart these ruins and used it. So a lot of the evidence that we might be able to rely on is gone. But this guy seems kind of alone in thinking that this is an actual Mayan site. I guess another thing he relies on are these pyramidal shaped earth mounds that are 5-sided pyramids instead of the sort of traditional 4 you would think, which I guess has some significance in terms of being related to Mayan structures, some Mayan structures. I guess I thought the most interesting stuff was the language similarities.
Yeah, that was cool. If true. I've reached the point of not complete skepticism of everything in this article. The article was a little hard to follow, unfortunately. We'll link to it in the show notes, and we'll link to some of the pushback as well, so people can go read up on both. I didn't find this article particularly well written or easy to follow the story that was trying to be told here. But yeah, apparently there was a branch of more northern Mayans called the Itza Mayans that share, like you were saying, some linguistic similarity to some of the Creek and Choctaw people that we know well that were in
from the area, right?
Southeastern U.S. or what is now the Southeastern U.S. That's also the weird thing in talking about this, and that's something I think about a lot with these stories is that, like, you talk about the fascination with masonry, but the U.S. definitely had, or before it was the US, pre-Columbian North America, definitely had this like very impressive mound building culture, right? And multiple mound building cultures. There are a lot of really cool mound sites in the US. I actually grew up really close to one in South Charleston, West Virginia. There's a big mound site that I used to see every time I went to go take piano lessons. I've always thought that the mound stuff was really fascinating.
Yeah. I can't say that I was always more in the like people are not interesting to me camp when I was younger. So I was definitely more in like show me a real fossil, not these fake people.
Not the human made stuff.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I became a paleontologist too, so on some level I agree. But like when it's a big structure, I think that's kind of cool.
I always found the structures and stuff pretty cool, but then I turned out to be an engineer. Yeah, I turned into an engineer, I guess.
And then the other thing that I think about when I read articles like this is a lot of people seem to, I think it's just one of our built-in inherent biases. We think that our border is real and that like it would have been acknowledged by the Mayan civilization.
How would they get through customs?
Right. I mean, I recognize that part of our border with Mexico is a river. And so crossing rivers is not nothing, but at the same time, it is made up.
You would you would have had to get across the Mississippi after that's ridiculous. That's much harder than the Rio Grande.
Yeah, so I always think it's kind of funny when we're like, how Mayans in the U.S. My God, there's no way. How would they? It's like, well, why would they have not moved north substantially and over the course of their civilization, or moved in any direction, really? And then it's been pointed out that like even the term Mesoamerican is this weird term that seems designed specifically to cut Mexico out of North America and lump it with Central America, and I find that a little
and why central from a European perspective, it's just the Americas, right? It's sometimes even just one continent, which I mean there's this really skinny piece of land there that makes an obvious place to cut them, and we dug a hole through it. So I guess that makes it easier to decide where we want to start North and South America. But I can see, but then again, they call Europe a separate continent from Asia, so I don't have a lot of sympathy for them.
Well, yeah, there's that tiny little mountain range in Russia.
Yeah.
The Urals.
Yeah.
So Mark Williams, the archaeologist who did some of the work at this site, who's affiliated with the University of Georgia, wrote of specifically this piece that Patrick found, the Maya connection to, this is quote, the Maya connection to legitimate Georgia archaeology is a wild and unsubstantiated guess on the part of the Thornton Fellow, that's the guy who wrote the blog post. No archaeologist will defend this flight of fancy, which from an academic perspective, like those are harsh words.
Pretty blunt.
Right.
And then on his Facebook page wrote, this is total and complete bunk. There is no evidence of Maya in Georgia.
I have to say,
it says that the site is consistent with, broadly defined Mississippian cultures of the time. And the site, do we say how old the site is, Patrick? I guess we did. It's about 900 years old.
Yeah, I don't know.
1,100 years old from.
Yeah, circa 1,000 years old. I fully believe that. Like, I had a hard time thinking that there would be a Maya site in northern Georgia and nowhere between northern Georgia and Mexico.
It does seem like it would take a while to get from where they were to Georgia.
Right.
Seems like they would move very incrementally.
But I guess, if you think about sort of rainforest adaptability, like there's not, you get into what's the Southern Appalachians and then rainforest things that might have helped you in the rainforest might come in handy again in the mountains of the Southern Appalachians.
But I think one of the true trends in this kind of archaeology is recognizing that these cultures were far more interconnected and had trade routes and exchange hubs and cultural centers and cities, full-on cities. So I think that to me is the thing that I take away from this is that there's probably a lot more back and forth going on than I think we tend to isolate and lump, like the Aztecs are this unit of people that existed. And and that's the other, thing. If folks follow Kelly on Twitter, she's been doing a series of just profiling a different species from around the farm every day, plant and animal. And I don't know if she's done a fungus yet, but I presume fungus are in the running. And what's really cool is she would, try to provide a little bit of context and talk a little bit maybe about like what the native peoples would use this plant for. And somebody pointed out that like she had been using past tense verbs in describing how the native peoples would have interacted with this plant when the culture she's referring to still exist. And so like that's the other thing about like people say that the Mayan civilization collapsed, but there are still Mayan people in the world. They didn't go away completely. And they, I think that's kind of cool and worth thinking about and talking about these stories too.
Well, I think also like we've talked about this before on the show, but Europeans showing up and bringing their diseases with them, that's what essentially wiped out a lot of the Native Americans, both North, Meso, and South. And I think even when they got around to sort of finding a lot of these cities, they had already been decimated by disease. And so I think even from the very beginning, it looked as if there were a lot fewer people and a lot more space between sort of settlements than there actually was just even decades before that. The other thing I want to say is, having read this book about the Honduran civilization and the discovery of those things, some of the things the archaeological community was willing to do to each other to discredit finds.
Is it like Bone Wars level stuff?
Yeah, it made me think like paleontologists had kind of a mild case of it.
Oh wow, that's wild.
But so I don't think I'm entrenched in this community well enough to really know which side of this to fall on. It seems like a blog post versus the
a
professor,
career.
a career professor at University of Georgia. That's a fallacy to fall into. So I have to say, very skeptical that that's a Mayan site in northern Georgia, but I think I probably need to learn a little bit more before I'm willing to fully discount it.
I don't have, like, if we, Patrick, you and I often like to talk about things in terms of prior plausibility, right? Yeah. To me, it is entirely plausible that you could find a Mayan, and again, I don't have a ton of background in this type of work, but like I don't have any prior reason to believe that you couldn't find an archaeological site in Georgia. It doesn't seem like the work has been done here to show that this is one. And Patrick, getting back to your point about like what the continent must have looked like when the earliest settlers were arriving after disease had they were essentially arriving in a post-apocalyptic wasteland, right?
Yep.
It was that bad. And some of the earliest settlers, I think this is just like typifies so much of this sort of mindset that maybe still exists in America a little bit. They arrived to these empty villages and like rows of crops that were already planted, and they thought like, oh, God must want us here.
Right.
And then it's like, no, other people did hard work and then died, and you're coming along and being like, this is perfect. What a great place to settle. It's like it was already built for us.
I mean, and somebody should write this novel, right? It could have just as easily gone the other way, right? You show up and there's a disease that decimates you and you take it back to Europe.
Well, except, I could see that, except wasn't part of the reason that the Europeans had more diseases to spread was the way that they lived in filth and lived with the animals and didn't have adequate septic systems and things like that.
Sure, I accept that the probability is on the side of the Europeans, but these things are random. It does, just because it's more probable that it worked that way doesn't mean it couldn't have worked the other way.
Yeah, the whole exploration party could have just been wiped out immediately by some random disease.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, the Vikings bathed a lot more often than the rest of the Europeans, and they didn't get anybody sick when they got to North America first.
Yeah, there you go.
How about that?
It's filthy Europeans that think they never have to shower. I don't know what's up with
that. Well, speaking of, what are we speaking of to move on to the next segment? I don't know. I'm lost.
Speaking of mixing of cultures from multiple places, it's time for the
PaleoPOW. We have a diverse audience, and we love hearing from them, and we're going to cover some of their feedback in the next segment, the PaleoPOW. PaleoPOWs, the final segment of the show, where we take feedback from the listeners and talk about it.
Okay, so my PaleoPOW this week is a comment that was left on our show on the Podbean app related to episode 316, which was, I think, me, Ryan, and Abe. A message in a rocket. And at the end of that episode, we did a little radio play of a pitch meeting for Wishbone, the television show.
Not an original piece.
Not an original piece. We did not write it. It was great. I don't remember who wrote it, but if you go back to that episode, we tell you all about it. And it's excellent. But anyway, so user Angry on Podbean was apparently not so angry about our pitch meeting. He wrote in to say, pitch meeting, so great. And thank you, Angry. We thought it was pretty great, too. That's why we wanted to do it. We had a lot of fun recording it. And hopefully everybody else enjoyed our very silly radio play thereof.
We had fun with it.
I had fun with it, for sure.
Yeah. So thanks for writing in, Angry.
Yeah.
I hope you feel better.
Less angry.
Patrick, what do you got for us? Man, I only had half that coffee beer thing, and like it feels exactly like having that like caffeine alcohol buzz. It is it's a wild ride right now, guys.
Loco, what are those things called?
Four Loko.
Yeah,
I never had one.
I haven't either, but I'm imagining what you.
It's not that. I don't think it's that bad. It's not like energy drink jitters, but it's definitely like that, like heightened, like eyes wide open caffeine, but also like little smooth.
Okay.
Sorry, go ahead, Patrick.
Got an email from Dylan S, and he's commenting on kind of like how poor of a job we did the last time we were on the mic together, Brian. The subject of this email is a book that talks a lot about booze, including how Scotch is made. If that clues you into where he's going with this. He says, "Hey, I was listening to the recent episode and was quite surprised that you weren't more familiar yet with the known and unknown science behind Scotch fermentation / distillation, or stroke distillation, as they would say here in the US, or in in the UK. I quite enjoyed the following book, and it covers a pretty wide range of topics regarding drinking ethanol. I haven't had time to vet the science, but it seemed well resourced for pop science. I read more academic papers, and it's not that level. # senior grad student. Pretty chatty and wandering, but I think that's appropriate for a book about booze. It had some discussion on, e.g., why malting is needed and how to make it not needed, what is currently known about why people get drunk, etc. You can find it at a library or buy it from a local bookstore. They sound like they need help.
At the moment.
I wasn't sure what that
wasn't referring to a unit of atmospheric pressure, don't worry.
Or an automatic teller machine. It's definitely
an ATM machine.
Yeah, you put in your PIN number.
Automatic teller machine.
Yeah. La Brea Tar Pits.
What are more of these? Rio Grande River.
The Los Angeles Angels.
That's a good one.
It's definitely
Sierra Nevada mountains.
It's definitely worth reading. All right, so he gives us a link to a book called Proof: The Science of Booze by Adam Rogers. And he also says, P.S. I looked at the webpage and looked at the profile pictures. I swear my mental picture from just the voices was pretty much a cyclic permutation to left of Ryan, Patrick, Charlie, Ben. Some podcasters are curious to hear what people thought they look like. I'm just surprised all the pics I had in my head are there, just with different names. I can't remember if it comes up before here. I don't fully know what he's referring to there in terms of whose picture matches whose voice, but God, that is amazing. Isn't it how you get a picture of somebody in your head and you look at them on the website and just think...
Well, like my reading of this was, at one point Dylan looked up what we looked like, but forgot, like, so he had mental images of what the different faces were, but ascribed mentally the wrong voice to it.
Yeah, that's what I'm
reading. So now he pictures me looking like Ben and you looking like Charlie. I mean, for years we got comments that people couldn't tell you and Charlie apart vocally.
I was one of those people.
Well, Justin and I thought we were a bigger problem.
Yeah, but then he quit.
Right.
solve that problem.
But Charlie and I feel like we have more distinctive voices. But Justin and I, God, even sometimes I would listen to it.
Trying to edit it.
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny. Well, Dylan, thanks for the recommendation. But beat you to the punch. I already have that book. It was a gift from my in-laws. And yeah.
How's that relationship with your in-laws?
Good.
Giving you booze books.
I mean, they gave it to me a while ago. They know that it's an interest of mine. I think I'd given them the rum book that I'd read and really enjoyed because it's functionally a history book and a bottle of rum by Wayne Curtis. And because my father-in-law spent time in the Peace Corps in Venezuela and a rum guy, so I gave him that book, and I think they realized I had an interest, and it's it's a science book about booze, so it's got like a cool Erlenmeyer flask on the cover.
Yeah, that's awesome. Oh, you were going somewhere with that. Carry on.
I wasn't. Oh. I am aware of the book. I appreciate the recommendation. Patrick, read up so we can have a more informed discussion.
Yeah,
next time.
Right. No, I should. I don't know.
You sound so tired when you said that.
I have a hard time reading right now. I don't know. Pandemic brain, I guess. I also don't know how much time I should devote to booze. Right. That's like a thing you like wonder if you should be devoting time to it or not. I mean,
there's some cool science to distillation.
I think the science of booze is more appropriate than the actual consumption. I also wanted to mention that the Freakonomics podcast, I suspect we have a lot of listeners that we overlap with. Going back to what people sound like, back when like Stephen Dubner and Stephen Levitt were both on there a lot, man, those two, you look up a picture of them and you totally think the opposite person should have the voice that goes with the picture. All right. That was a side show that I think I'm hearing crickets too now. So let's.
No, I'm trying to remember the term for the reason that you can't distill 100% ethanol. There's like a cool chemical thing that I'll when Patrick's read proof, he'll be able to tell me about, where it's like once you get to a certain amount of ethanol that's boiled off from the water in the distillation setup, like the boiling point changes, and so like you can't continue getting more pure ethanol out.
That's interesting.
So you can only distill ethanol up to a certain point, which is why the lab grade ethanols that are higher than that point, about 95%, are not potable because they have to use like benzenes to extract that extra little bit of ethanol to make the pure mixture. And so that's why it has nothing to do with how alcoholic they are. It has to do with the process you have to use to get alcohol above that 95% point.
I love chemistry and I'm so bad at it. So
azeotropic mixture. That's what it is. Fractional distillation of non-ideal mixtures, Patrick.
Yeah, man. I'm telling you, anybody out there who thinks you're not good enough at whatever it is you like, I promise you can make a career in it.
I don't know if I followed your logic on that one, but
no, I was just saying. As I was talking over you when you were talking about this, I was like, man, I love chemistry, but I'm so bad at it. And then you finished your thought, and I was like, so anybody out there who thinks that you can't make a living doing what it is you love just because you're bad at it, don't be dissuaded.
Just look at Patrick's career as a podcaster.
As a geochemist. Yeah, that's right.
So we have one last thing to do, and that is create an expert where before there was none.
Oh, good.
And that is coming up with a BSso Patreon thesis for Diego Z. So if you are a Patreon supporter, and we recognize that right now it might be a tough time for you to support things that you enjoy in an entertainment space. So we definitely appreciate everyone who has stuck with us and have no hard feelings about people who've had to decrease their amount or stop giving altogether for a little while. Like totally understandable given the circumstances of the world, but we still have a few dissertations and theses left to give out, and Diego Z has earned his. And so we gotta figure out what Diego specialized in earning this, impressively titled tome. I don't know much about Diego.
Okay. What do you know?
I know that he's a kind person. Because a while back, I was having some personal issues that made getting the show out hard, and I explained what was going on Patreon, and he left a kind comment that says, great to hear new episodes, but don't blame yourself. Life happens, not your fault. I thought that was very sweet.
It was.
Something I needed to hear in the moment, because I was having a tough time. So that's all I know about Diego is kindness.
And these things generally fall in line with some of the topics we've discussed on the show.
That's how we do it.
So we got Mayans and thalattoscuhians.
I'm searching.
Crocodile Tiers, right? Kindness, crocodile tears.
That's the word. That's what I was going for. I was like, there's a saying that has to do with alligators or crocodiles. What is it? What am I thinking of? Got there before me.
Crocodile Tiers, and then maybe something about like using Archosaur feces to fertilize Mayan crops or something?
Let's see. Terrace. Just see.
So it's an insincere expression of grief, right? So related.
Maybe you're saying Diego's a con artist.
No. I got it. Look, Crocodile Tiers, Tires.
Oh my god. What comes after the colon?
My potential Mayan terraces of the thalattoscuhian fossil in the southeastern United States? ?
I think. Okay, hang on. You lost me a little bit with the post colon. Does it have to be thalattoscuhians? Or can it be crocodilians generally?
It can be crocodilians generally.
Where we never said where those thalattoscuhian fossils were from.
I don't know.
We left
It doesn't matter at this point.
I think they were from North Georgia.
I think so.
How about potential Mayan tool use of Archosaur bones or so, Archosaurian fossils in terraced farming sites in
North
Georgia,
southeastern United States.
Diegolandia.
Diego.
No, that'd be presumptuous of him to study his own homeland.
San Diego.
I could get behind that. I don't know. Yep. There's a lot of Archosaurs on the western.
Doesn't matter.
I mean, that's too good not to.
All right.
Saint Diego. Are you typing it on the Slack, Patrick? So
no, I'm not.
Okay.
What's
I'll type
Patrick?
It. Crocodile Tiers.
Why is the guy with the loudest keyboard? Oh my! Everything.
It sounds better.
That's good. It does sound better. This is
does it?
Foley artist. Yeah.
Yeah. Crocodile Tiers, and then colon. What are we going with?
Evidence from La Brea Tar Pits, Los Angeles Angels, and San Diego, and San Diego's Diegolandia.
Crocodile Tiers, Tier. Inclusion of Archosaurian fossil remains in Mayan farming sites from San Diego ?
Best thesis ever.
We say that so often, and it really was a BSso.
Is that right?
Let's put a potential in front of inclusion, and I think we're good to go. All right, read out the whole thing, Joe.
All right. Crocodile Tiers, potential inclusion of Archosaurian fossil remains in Mayan farming sites from San Diego?
Oh my god.
It's so good.
I only put the question mark on there because I thought we should make it like not an open and shut case, but then when you read it, I realized we also did a Ron Burgundy thing.
I love it.
The Crocodile Tiers pun is pretty amazing.
Chef's kiss, right?
Yeah. Yes, very much so. Okay, well that's
solid.
That's an episode, gentlemen. Anyone got anything to plug other than staying home, wearing a mask, being kind?
I printed a bunch of shark teeth. That was cool.
You did print a bunch of shark teeth. You got thanked for that. You printed shark teeth to help out friend and former guest of the show, Sora Kim.
Yeah,
nice.
some jaws.
Yeah, Patrick. Joe's 3D printing teeth now.
He's liking my car hate tweets. Joe, you're really stepping up here.
I'm trying.
We see big things for you in the future of this endeavor, Joe. Yeah. So that's your plug is 3D printing of teeth.
Yeah.
Patrick, what do you got?
I live a much less interesting existence than Joe does. I got nothing. I got nothing big. Yeah. What do you got?
Also nothing. Just staying home. Going on the occasional bike ride. Buy a pandemic bike if you haven't bought a bike already. That's my plug.
Yeah.
I'm waiting for my post ? COVID infection to subside enough to get back on the bike and ride a little bit. Yeah.
I didn't know. Don't think I knew you weren't feeling well, but I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah.
Didn't I text you about it? I texted you about it.
You might have.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you're feeling better now. I hope you're able to get back on the bike soon. I went for a long ride yesterday, and it was pretty nice.
Social distance recording.
Nice. Yeah. We are thousands of miles apart.
Yeah, we definitely we jumped the gun on preparing to record in COVID world by at least 10 years,
10 years.
of recording apart from each other. All right. Well, if you would like to check out the links to the stories we talked about, links to the book Proof, if you can get it read before Patrick, we'll give you a prize. And
I got a link to the National Geographic story that was basically a summary of that Lost City book in Honduras.
If you can put that in the Slack, I will incorporate it into the show notes, and those will be at sciencesortof.com in the show notes section of the webpage. Some changes to the website coming up. Might already be done by the time this episode comes out. There's going to be some cool new stuff, hidden secret stuff. So if you are a
Easter eggs
person who's interested in podcasting and how to podcast, we're gonna start maybe giving you a little content, some resources. Stay tuned for that. That's what I'll leave you with, a little tease. And with that, come back next time for a whole lot more science.
Sort of.
Visit sciencesortof.com for show notes, links to all the stories we talked about, and ways to interact with the hosts, guests, and other listeners. Science Sort of is brought to you by the Brachiolobe Media Network of podcasts, with audio engineering by Tim Dobbs of the Encyclopedia Brunch podcast. That's all for this week. See you next time on Science Sort of.
This crocodile article.
You're kind of the designated dumb guy on that one.
I know. That's why I stopped worrying about preparing for it.
Right.
Once we switched from Mars robots to ancient crocodiles, I said, all right, let's make my job easier.
Are they ancient or are they prehistoric?
Is there a difference?
I think ancient is more recent.
Really?
Dumb guy asks question.